Thank you. Aman, Indonesia.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much. My presentation is quite long, so actually prefer to just go directly to my short version of presentation. So what I'm going to discuss today, because we actually don't have particular project with unit, but what I'm going to do is to highlight some of the development at national level and one occasion where we have cooperation with unit and how we can move from that particular workshop. So, sorry. If you want first to update you with the legal and policy development in Indonesia, while actually since 2012, the map that we have produced in Indonesia now totaling like 10 million hectares of indigenous land have been mapped by indigenous peoples, and 2.4 million hectares has been accepted by the government agencies, which is the national geospatial agencies, to be included in the what's called one map policy that has been also part of the climate change strategy in Indonesia. And then the second part is, at the moment, currently the National Parliament is working on a draft law on the protection and recognition of the rights of indigenous peoples. It has been there since 2011, but then since we've been quite busy with the national general election in the last 6 months, so the progress has been very slow. And also the negotiations of the elements contained in the draft has been a little bit weakened by the government. So we are thinking to have further dialogues on that. So we are not on the rush on that. But last year on 16 May, we have historical recognitions by our national constitutional court, where they affirm the constitutional rights of indigenous peoples over our land, territories, and resources, including forests. And that was a very historical win for indigenous peoples and, of course, all the countries, because for the first time the government and the state recognized that they've been ignored, and then there have been a lot of violation against indigenous peoples on behalf of the state's control over forests. So from there, the National Commission on Human Rights has been planning to conduct a national inquiry on conflicts of indigenous peoples within the forest zones. So the Constitutional Court saying that the state has been ignored indigenous peoples, their indigenous peoples' rights has been violated against, and also the indigenous peoples have suffered from those. That's why the National Commission on Human Rights and the kick-off, the launching of the national inquiry is tomorrow. So we probably it will take us the next 6 months or 1 year to complete the national inquiry by the National Commission on Human Rights. So those are the big things. But again, the conflict of indigenous peoples still taking place, the arrest of indigenous peoples, and also the human rights violations still taking place. But from the perspective of how UNIP can play a role in this whole thing, is I wanted to point out where once the UNIP through UNDP facilitated exchange with the Philippines government and Indonesian government, and also with the parliament, and it has helped to break through the ice that has been there. And from there, they started to discuss with us, and then we can work together to produce the draft. So from there, I think the role of the unit is how to ensure the implementations of the rights of indigenous peoples and brokering dialogues with government at national level is very important, because that's also what the lesson learned we get from the work that we have done with UNIP. So I think strengthening dialogue, brokering, bridging dialogue between indigenous peoples and government is very important. And the second one, among the agency themselves, they also need to talk each other, because sometimes they don't talk each other. So I've been actually proposing to have like interagency support at national level. And so from there, you can coordinate and work together and share your agenda, and also the current national inquiry by the National Commission on Human Rights should be also supported. So that's when I say priority areas of indigenous peoples in Indonesia. Those are the things that we hope actually can be strengthened by cooperation with UNIP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sambalingi. I have been remiss, I beg your pardon, in my haste to get Mr. Devasish Roy to his next event. I inadvertently skipped over the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Denmark to the United Nations, Mr. I. Peterson. I beg your pardon, and I thank you so much for being here. My apologies. We would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's okay. I think it's very interesting statements. Very prepared to sit here in but I would like to express our thanks also to UNIP for organizing this, and not least today when we were launching the report on success stories, cooperation to promote and protect indigenous people's rights at the country level. I think that's a very, even though a bit long, important title, and I'll come back to that in a moment. We all know that this report comes at a very important moment, only a few months away from hopefully the World Conference on Indigenous People. And there's no doubt that this report will provide a very important input to the deliberations of the conference. Denmark was among the main supporters of the launch of UNIP back in 2011. That's no coincidence. Advancing people's rights has been a long-standing priority for Denmark and Greenland. Back in the 1990s, we were among the strongest supporters of establishing a permanent forum for indigenous peoples. In our bilateral cooperation with a number of countries, we are supporting indigenous people's rights in a lot of programs. So support of the launch of UNIP was quite logical, you can say. But I would also like to underline it's not just UNIP for the sake of UNIP, but certainly for the changes that we can hopefully expect through the work of UNIP. And I think that has already been mentioned here, what are the possibilities. A few other important reasons I would like to mention here. First is, and I'll come back there to the title, I think it's very important, also in these days at the forum, that we keep focus on efforts at the country level. To effectively improve the lives of indigenous peoples and realize that their rights. So no doubt significant results have been achieved at the international level over the past 25 years. We've got a normative framework and a range of protective mechanisms put in place, and indigenous peoples today have a voice here in the UN, as we indeed witness these days at the 13th session of the forum. But we have committed ourselves through the adoption in 2007 of the Declaration of the Rights of the Indigenous Peoples to improve human rights conditions on the ground. And how much have we actually managed to improve the lives? We see a lot of smiling faces on the front pages of the report. That's good. We know a lot of progress has been made, possibilities have been created. But the reality, I think, is also that there's still a lot to be done. And that's really what we should keep focus on as well. and not to be done before all the objectives of the declaration can be set to become reality, and we simply need to advance this implementation. And with this in mind, I think UNEP has supported important country projects in many countries. I'm sure that we will hear even more detail of that today. I will only mention one positive side effect of these projects. They have actually served as catalysts for mobilizing additional resources. It's estimated that $3.7 million in additional funds have been raised for similar initiatives at the country level. So that's a really good point. Second important reason is that UNEP creates space for dialogue on the national level. We also heard that also from Dr. Roy. Dialogue among national actors, governments, as well as human rights and indigenous organizations and the international partners. I think it has actually helped improve, hopefully, the coordination within the UN system as well, making the UN effectively deliver as one. We know that indigenous issues can be sensitive, and enhancing dialogue, understanding, and respect among different national actors is therefore very important. And cornerstone, when we speak of indigenous people's rights, is the right to participate in decision making. The corresponding duty of states to consult. That's something that we, as you know, spend quite a lot of time on these days in NGO. So in that sense, I think UNEP can help set and enhance the respect for international standards, including perhaps the most important aspect of the indigenous people's rights. So we look forward to this discussion. We look forward to the work of UNEP, and thanks a lot for inviting us here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will have our third speaker from the Asia country region. This is Mr. Dev Kumar Sunwar, advocate and investigative journalist and a member of the Lawyers Association for Human Rights of Nepalese Indigenous Peoples in Nepal.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to express or to share the good lessons from Nepal. Actually, for those who don't know or who wants to know about Nepal, I want to give you a little bit background. Nepal is obviously a small country, but having 40% of the population are indigenous peoples. 59 indigenous peoples are officially recognized by the government, and 21 more indigenous communities are apt to be recognized because high-level committee has recommended government to recognize. Obviously, the indigenous peoples in Nepal range from small hunter-gatherer to large, to those who are highly advanced and urban-centered. And obviously, the indigenous peoples in Nepal are predominantly in remote. They are predominantly staying in remote area, remote corner. They have been marginalized, suffered for centuries. Obviously, as we talk about ILO Convention 169, Nepal is the second country in Asia after Fiji and the first country in in South Asia to ratify ILO Convention 169. And obviously, the ratification of ILO Convention 169 itself is a significant move that has given the presence of indigenous peoples actually in the international level. After the ratification of ILO Convention 169, obviously the presence of the government as well as indigenous peoples organizations in international levels or international forums like United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples Issues have increased a lot. As we talked about the UNIP, Nepal is one of the countries that has been implementing the UNIP in partnership jointly between the ILO office in Kathmandu, Lawyers Association for Human Rights of Nepalese Indigenous Peoples, where I represent, and Nepal Federation of Indigenous Peoples, NEFIN, and also the NEFDIN. It is called National Foundation for Development of Indigenous Nationalities. It is the government body which is formed by the government to look after the indigenous people's issues. These four organizations are jointly implementing the UNIP program in Nepal. After obviously implementing this UNIP program, what has taken place is that obviously, as I told you earlier, that Nepal has signed ILO Convention 169, but when we talk about implementation part, has always been a challenge in Nepal because of misunderstanding and because of misinterpreting of the ILO Convention 169. And after the UNIP program, the government body, jointly with other organizations, have been working to draft actually the frequently asked questions, the FAQs in Nepal right now, but it is apt to be endorsed by the government. Earlier, after the ratification of ILO Convention 169, government had formed high-level committee in order to implement this ILO Convention 169, and that committee also had recommended a long list of action plan to the government to implement the ILO Convention 169. This is also apt to be endorsed by the government. But I hope after this UNIP program, the government is also positive in order to endorse both, not only the National Action Plan, but also this FAQs, because the government itself is taking part in order to make these FAQs. And the way forward, what I look is that up to now, the FAQs is being formulated or being made right. Currently, as I told you earlier, that indigenous peoples are predominantly, they are in the remote corner, they are residing in the remote area, so that I believe that UNIP, after that FAQs is prepared, UNIP should take some actions in order to make that FAQs to translate into different indigenous peoples' languages, in order to make different applications, and make it available through the, let's say, different medias. Maybe that could be community radios and other community-owned other organizations. That's all. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, and thank you to all of our speakers. I think we'll take one question from the floor before we move on to other success stories. Is there a question? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Hello? My name is Joanne Spotted Bear. I'm a Lakota. I'm an original descendant of the Little Bighorn and 1DB Massacre, World War I, World War II, a survivor of 1DB occupation 1979, and today a law advocate and assistant judge to Rudy James and a Teton treaty representative for the Oglala Sioux tribe. I have a question for the kill the word. Anyway, the question is, you were saying write languages that everybody would understand. I currently have a client, Wesley Glenn Dick, Indian named Pushwash, who is currently in jail and an IGO member of the United Nations. He's also a treaty representative of the Snake Valley Treaty in Nevada, state of Nevada. And he was saying that I believe that indigenous issues, I just wanted to say for the record, right behind us in a suitcase, we have 4,000 to 7,000 documents of embezzlement concerning Washington. And we have a government-to-government relationship and a nation-to-nation relationship with all nations around the world. However, when I make a statement to the courts, I feel as though nobody's listening to me, especially the Department of Interior. And the XL pipeline wants to go through my land and wanted me as a historical landmark for one over 100 years. And I feel as though people are betraying us on our own land. And I was wondering, you guys say you're lawyers up there and judges, well, I need your help because I'm getting overthrown on my own land as an indigenous. So what can I do to help, or where can I go for that extra help?
Thank you for the question. I think there's a lot in there, and I don't know if any of our panelists specifically want to respond to how your strategies maybe could help with treaty rights or land rights in the U.S. I appreciate the question, and I'm going to move on to the next panelist, but maybe that's a conversation you and I could have at another time. I am a lawyer, and yeah, I am a lawyer. I will admit it. Okay, you know what? I think we have to move on to the next panel, or we're not going to get all of our speakers, but I will certainly look for your question after the next round. So thank you very much to this group, and if we can have our next speakers move up to the table, please. As our next panelists take their seat, I thank you all for your attention. We're sorry to have to keep this so brief, but we wanted to make sure to get through all of our speakers today who've traveled very, very long distances to be here with us. Our fourth speaker is Mr. Marius Biakele, pardon me if I've mispronounced that, Child Protection Specialist with UNICEF and unit focal person for the UN agencies in Congo.
Je vous remercie de l'opportunité que vous me donnez du haut de cette tribune pour partager l'expérience du Congo en matière d'appui à la promotion et la protection des droits des populations autochtones. Ceci s'est fait dans le cadre d'une initiative conjointe UNICEF, UNEAP, NUD et OIT pour accompagner le gouvernement dans la prise de textes d'application de la loi de protection des populations autochtones qui a été promulguée en février 2011, et nous voudrions que ces textes soient signés pour que cette loi ne reste pas morte. Nous voudrions donc des textes, des décrets d'application signés et opérationnels, et nous avons